All right, everybody, I think we are going to get started. Thank you for coming to my talk, What the Homelab? My name is Jim Schultz. I'm an educator over at WCTC, the Waukesha County Technical College. I teach a lot of cybersecurity courses, and there's a number of reasons why I've been wanting to do this talk. So first off, I'm kind of like a lifelong IT enthusiast and Homelabber. I've been doing home labs ever since I was in high school. I remember still I had my first computer and my family finally replaced their family computer. And I was able to take that and I have formatted it, put Linux on it. And it was a really great way for me to learn Linux, how to install different services. And I've been doing it kind of my whole career, and it's been a really good way for me to learn and grow my skill set. And then also, as an educator, I think home labs is one of the topics that comes up in literally every one of my classes, and we just never have enough time to really dive into it. So I have a lot of students here. Raise of hand if you are one of my students or just a student in general. Thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate that. So this is for all of you, right? And then finally, I recently passed the OSCP and OSWP. Those exams, right, that was fantastic. It was a really good experience. I love learning that stuff, but man, those offset classes are super expensive. And as I've been reflecting on this stuff, I realized you can learn pretty much all these skills in your home for almost no money, right? So home labs are a fantastic way to learn, to grow your skill set, and it's awesome, right? I know a lot of my students here, classes at WCTC are 8 weeks long, right? And for me, it's really valuable to teach the skills so you can take the stuff home and practice it whenever you have that downtime, whenever you have those moments, even if it isn't during the academic term, if it's over the summer, the winter, so you can make use of this stuff. So this is all for all of you, and I am super excited to be here. So I know a lot of you are thinking about, what does Jim's home lab look like? And this does change. This is my current home lab that I have up here on the screen. I'm going to kind of walk through what I have, but we'll be doing a lot of just talking about goal setting. How can you think about deploying a home lab? What kind of goals do you have? What do you want to learn? What do you want to build? So this is my current environment, and this does change every year or so. And walking down from the top, I got a patch panel at the top. One of the things that I did when I moved into my home about 10 years ago is I ran networking all through the house, right? Physical cabling. And that was fantastic. So I have a patch panel at the top of my rack. And then moving below that, I have some equipment. And pretty much all the equipment I have in my lab is either repurposed from previous projects. At the bottom there, you might notice, I know the text is maybe a little bit small, I have a TrueNAS box, and that's literally my old desktop computer. I took out of the traditional desktop tower case, I put it into a rack mount case, and I repurposed it for a NAS. So fantastic use of that. And most of the other equipment I've gotten secondhand on sites like eBay. Companies, they'll sell this stuff secondhand. You can pick it up for pretty cheap. So going down, I got a nice 10 gigabit switch. We'll be talking about, do you need a 10 gig switch, or can you get by with just a 1 gig switch? We'll talk about that. I run a pfSense firewall currently. That is a fantastic way to learn, especially if you are interested in cybersecurity, which I think is most of you here, right? You're all at CypherCon. That does routing. I have IDS on there as well, and a bunch of other really cool services. Cable modem, of course. And I think as you're building out your home lab, it's also beneficial to put some fun into that, right? So I run a Plex media server, which is fun to stream movies around my house. And I have an antenna in my attic to stream over-the-air television. So what you see down there then on that small little rack are over-the-air tuners, right? So that connects into my antenna in my attic. So I can do DVR functionality with all the over-the-air broadcasts. Then below that, we got some compute. So I have kind of an older Dell rack mount server that's currently running VMware ESXi, although I'm probably going to switch that out over the summer, and we'll talk about some of the reasons why, and some of the reasons why you might want to try out different hypervisors and things anyways. Followed by NAS, all my movies, games, backups of my VMs, a lot of infrastructure, and then of course battery backup. And do you think that one little UPS is enough to really support all this equipment? No. So I kind of have a janky setup, right? Over this past summer, I had some power issues. I live out in the Waukesha area. Thunderstorms, things like that. My UPS wasn't holding up, so what I did is I went around my house. I have an office upstairs and some other desktops. So I grabbed some of those desktop UPSs that are currently kind of set up on the side over there, as well as PoE injectors, because my switch doesn't support 10 gigabit, or does not support power over Ethernet. But I have a lot of PoE devices, things like access points, video doorbells, things like that. So I got a couple of PoE injectors to service some of those. And my lab is just for me in my current state. Take this as inspiration. You don't have to copy and paste this. You can make this your own. And that's one of the awesome things about learning to home lab. So before you even begin your journey, I've been kind of reflecting on how I've been doing home lab over the years. And I really kind of realized home lab comes in phases. There's a cycle that I go through pretty regularly, right? As an educator, it's usually my winter and my summer breaks. But I go through this cycle, right? First off, I always set goals. There are going to be so many rabbit holes you're going to find yourself getting into. I think it's important to set goals. Inevitably, you'll be thinking about what kind of hardware do I need to support those goals? What kind of services do I want to run on-prem? You start thinking about, okay, what about some of the cloud services that are out there? How can I incorporate those, and do I want to? And then inevitably, you have some reflection, right? Things go right, things go wrong, your goals change, they evolve, they shift, and that is a part of the fun. So don't feel like you have to set and forget this stuff. This is a journey, and it is going to continue as long as you enjoy home labbing. So phase 1, goal setting. Prepare to enter the rabbit hole. There are so many rabbit holes you can find yourself following into. So really think about, before you even start buying equipment or procuring equipment from friends and family, think about really, what are your goals? What are you hoping to learn, right? What are you trying to get out of this environment? Is this supposed to be a whole home lab, right? They're going to run things like access points, Plex Media Server, or is this going to be more of a learning lab? Do you have very specific learning goals? Like maybe you want to learn more about how to hack into different types of virtual machines. Maybe you want to learn more about Linux, right? And you can run racks of equipment like I do, or you can also just, pick up a laptop and run some VMs, right? So you can make this stuff your own, but set those goals, right? And think about, what are the environmental constraints of your home? Let's say I was in a studio apartment. If I had that rack in my apartment, it would drive me nuts, right? My rack is in the basement, my bedroom's on the second floor, so that works for me. It may not work for you. So definitely do not be afraid to make this your own. There are a couple common questions that I often get asked when it comes to goal setting. So do I need a dedicated lab, or can I just use my laptop, right? And again, always reflect on and think about your goals. Think about what you're hoping to achieve, what you want to learn. Time is precious. We only all have 24 hours in the day. We have work, family, other things going on. So set some goals and stick with them as much as you can. And if you need to change them, that's okay, but be intentional about it. And understanding physical infrastructure is important, and it adds value. But if you don't have the space to put a rack or put extra gear, that's also okay. You might have to make compromises, and be mindful about that. And if your home if your home lab is also attached to your home network, meaning it's controlling access points and media services for your significant others, you're going to be much more mindful. I'll be talking about what I typically will refer to as the scream test, right? So something goes wrong, your partner is trying to work from home or stream a movie from Plex, and all of a sudden it stops working and you start hearing screams, right? So we'll be talking about all that. Cloud lab, can you run your lab entirely in the cloud? Yeah, you totally can run most things in the cloud. However, right, it's going to cost some money. And I think one of the best aspects of running a home lab is you can make this really, really economical. I know a lot of you are students with limited budgets. You can get by with really not a lot of expensive gear or monthly subscription bills. And where can you get help, right? So this is a 50-minute talk. Inevitably, you're gonna leave this room and you're gonna have so many questions. So there are a number of places. Number one, we're at CypherCon. I don't know how much time we're gonna have for Q&A right here during my session, but if you see me outside in the hallway after this, and I'll hang around for a bit, don't be afraid to pick my brain, right? Don't be afraid to pick my brain at any point in the future. Make friends, talk with your colleagues, definitely share ideas. Beyond that, reddit.com, they have a subreddit called Homelab, r/Homelab. Check that out. People post their successes and their failures, and it is a great way to spur curiosity and different types of ideas. And then beyond that, I'm involved in a number of different meetup groups, Millisec, MadSec, DC414, DC608. Go to these meetup groups. There are practitioners and those that are curious in cyber that attend these. They meet generally on a monthly basis. Again, wonderful ways to pick people's brains, share ideas, and to spur that innovation and curiosity. So once you have some goals set, right, start thinking about what kind of gear do you need? What kind of hardware do you need? You could go for, a traditional server, right? Or you could, once again, repurpose, laptop, desktop, and things like that. I would recommend, though, for at least for your compute, which is going to be your server, so to speak, you're probably going to want an x86 device, right? We'll be talking about, can you use a Raspberry Pi or an old MacBook? Maybe, right? But I'd recommend an x86 managed based device because that'll allow you to run a lot of pre-made VMs from services like VulnHub. You may or may not want some storage, right? There'll be some stuff built into here. You could have a dedicated NAS. You may want to have a dedicated firewall appliance, and there's so much you can do. Again, there are so many rabbit holes, so you got to be careful. On top of your compute, on top of your server, right? If you're going to have a whole home lab, if you're going to have a dedicated device to serve as your compute, you're inevitably going to want a hypervisor. There are a lot of different products that are out there that you can use. Traditionally, I've been using VMware ESXi, but there's also others as well. There's Proxmox, XCP-NG, and there's so many more. And again, play around. Don't stick with one and just set it in and forget it. Don't be afraid to try out different things. Firewall is, it's not 100% required that you have a dedicated firewall, but, I think it's really valuable. There's services like pfSense and OpenSense that are free, that are like really great quality with a lot of the enterprise features, and you can learn from this stuff. And of course, storage, if you're not going to have just on embedded storage on your compute, you can also set up things like TrueNAS. It's a fantastic service, or Unraid. As you're selecting hardware, again, think about your goals, right? Does anybody know what this is I have up on the screen, that image? Yeah, kilowatt, right? It measures power, right? A lot of these enterprise devices, they can draw a lot of energy, right? It's very, very easy to get a very large energy bill, right? And one of the goals and benefits of home labbing is you can do it economically. So be mindful about that. Think about your physical constraints. Electricity costs are huge. In my neck of the woods, they pay about 17 cents per kilowatt hour. So like one rack mount server under load could easily, pull 500 watts. That's $800 a year in electricity. So while you might get a very good deal on some secondhand hardware, be mindful if you're running that thing around the clock, it's going to rack up a bill for you. As you're thinking about it, there's different ways you can acquire different types of hardware. And as you can see, you can get really creative. This individual decided they wanted to build a rack and slide some Dell servers on there. The most economical option is repurposing an old computer, an old desktop, an old laptop. Go ahead, bring it into your basement, put it onto your desk with your new computer. You could turn that into your compute. There are low power options, which I like quite a bit. Dell has micro form factor computers. And there's also enterprise gear as well. And we'll talk about some of the advantages to working with that stuff. And again, question again, can you use a MacBook or a Raspberry Pi for compute? And you totally can, but a lot of those devices are going to have ARM-based processors. And while there's always a workaround, it's going to make it more challenging to run some of the pre-made and pre-packaged machines from Homelab and other sources. So you can totally do it, and you may have a use case for that. So again, reflect on your goals. Just reflect on your goals. If you want to challenge yourself, even if you want to run the Homelab stuff, you can totally make it work. Repurposing computers is a fantastic way to do this. Why? It's free. You avoid e-waste, which is great. Usually desktop cases have lots of room for GPUs, hard drives, all that fun stuff. But again, power usage, can be quite high. It's going to be slower because if you're using a 5-year-old computer, right, for your home lab, it's going to be older gear, and it's going to lack some of those enterprise features like IPKVM, dual power supply, which I know a lot of you want to kind of train on, get your hands on, so that way when you go out to maybe interview for a job, you can say, yeah, I've worked with rack mount equipment. I know what dual power supplies look like. You can slide them in and out and all that stuff. Micro form factor work really, really well, right? Because they're x86 based. Usually newer companies will cycle these out in their environment every 3 or 4 years. But there's one major con, right? Limited expandability. They usually will have one network card in it, right? One NIC. But you can always add a second NIC. This is, again, it's kind of like a DIY, kind of like a wonky setup. But these micro form factor computers, they have M.2 slots in here. So you can actually get an M.2 to RJ45 adapter to get a second network card in here. And like these Dell micro form factors, they have a punch out for a serial port. So instead of putting a serial connector in there, you just get an RJ45 connector plugged into the back. So there's, again, be creative. There's a lot of really cool things you can do when you put your mind to it. And enterprise gear, those rack-mounted servers, I think if you don't have a lot of constraints related to energy costs, these are really great devices to play around with. They're really, really realistic. They're super reliable. The server I have running in my basement is again, a decade old, and it is still chugging along. So super reliable. All the enterprise features, dual power supplies, hot swap hard drives, lots of I/O for expandability, lots of network interfaces, all the good stuff. But again, the major con is going to be power consumption and noise. This stuff can generate a lot of noise. If you are in an apartment or in a shared space, be very careful running this stuff. It may or may not go as well as you envision. Of course, firewall and routing, right? Again, I would highly recommend deploying pfSense, OpenSense. That's going to give you a really good foundational skill set in firewall technology, so totally do that. You can run them on Metal or in a virtual environment. This is my firewall. It's running on Metal. Why? Because I have a whole home lab, right? And this serves as the router for my home. I have that hypervisor. I do a lot of stuff on it during the work week, and my wife will oftentimes work from home. I want to make sure I can play around with my gear and not knock out the internet to our house. So that way I'm not causing disruptions to my lovely wife who's trying to get her work done. So I enjoy running on a Metal, but you can also virtualize it as well. pfSense, OpenSense, all that stuff can be run in VMware, Proxmox, and other common hypervisors. Switching, a question I get all the time is, do I need to get a specialized switch? It's totally up to you. Again, reflect on those goals. I prefer a managed switch. Why? Because I think it's really beneficial to learn about VLANs and other enterprise like switching technologies and terminologies. So VLANs are super useful. I'd recommend playing around with those. You can get you can get managed switches for not a lot of money, secondhand. Like that fancy Dell switch that I have in my basement, it was like a couple $100, right? When it was brand new, I'm sure it was like tens of thousands of dollars. But you can pick them up for not a lot of money, secondhand. What kind of port speed do you need? Again, think about your goals. I have a NAS. I have a lot of media around my home. I have a 10 gigabit switch, but you don't need that. If you only have the budget or you can only find a 1 gigabit switch, probably totally fine for your needs. And how many ports? You don't need a 48 port switch if you're not going to plug 48 devices into it, right? So don't be afraid to save some money going with a 24 port switch, 16, 8, whatever your needs are. Don't be afraid to size down if it makes sense. Wireless technologies. So inevitably, if you start replacing your router, your consumer Linksys D-Link router that has the wireless built in, you're going to need a solution for wireless in your home if you do a whole home lab. Ubiquiti has these access points, and show of hands, who's currently running something like this? Yeah, they're pretty awesome, right? You can set these up around your house. You have all the enterprise features you can toggle on or off. They are fantastic. And when you get these access points, I would also highly recommend picking up some Wi-Fi adapters that support monitor mode. I used these when I was prepping for my OSWP exam, the wireless professional exam for OffSec. And it was fantastic, kind of teaming up these monitor mode network adapters with these access points. And they're not a lot of money. You can actually buy these new for just $100, $200. And if you're going to buy something new, the access points are not that far of a stretch, and it's probably something you might be able to pick up and easily kind of deploy. Do you need a NAS or a SAN? Again, think about your goals. There are tons of pre-built options from QNAP and Synology, but I'm a very DIY person. I love building things. I love breaking things. I love understanding how things work, how they can be manipulated and abused. So I love building my own. So I'd highly recommend TrueNAS or Unraid. But if you want to buy a pre-built, that's totally fine. Think about how much size, how much space you might want to have available on that and for what kind of things. And again, even if you are like building your own, you don't need a fancy enclosure. You can just get a desktop case and load it up with drives. Totally fine. Do you need a rack? No, right? But if you start acquiring a large amount of gear, you're probably going to want one. And it doesn't have to be like a full 42U rack. Those things are massive. Has anybody had to move one around, right? They are heavy. Those are backbreakers. And imagine moving a giant rack into your basement and then moving and then having to get that thing out of there. So be very, very mindful about the weight of this equipment. I have a half-height rack. It's a 4-post rack. I like that a lot. Why? Because I can work around all the different sides. It's easy to get to all the different cables, right, and around the rack. And then if I ever want to move it, it breaks down, right, into individual components, and it makes it really easy to transport. You can get creative. People vertically mount their equipment. I don't know if I would trust this, but if you want to give that a shot, you do you, right? You can get really creative with all of your different ways you can deploy this equipment. A UPS, do you need an uninterruptible power supply? Again, I think it's worthwhile, especially if you're going to have a lot of gear. Enterprise equipment likes to turn off really quick, but it's oftentimes slow to boot back up. So I think it is good to have some sort of UPS. But don't aim for 4 hours of uptime. Aim for 5 to 15 minutes. UPS batteries generally won't provide a long period of uptime unless you have a giant UPS, which again is going to cost a lot of money. So be reasonable with your expectations. And of course, only connect what is needed. Do not connect printers, air conditioners, vacuum cleaners, etc. I worked in a tech office, and I'd see folks connect this stuff to their UPSs under their desk all the time. And I get the call, hey, why is this thing broken? I'm like, well, would you plug in? Like, oh, my vacuum cleaner. I'm like, well, of course, yeah, so don't do that. Where to find hardware? Please make use of your community, right? We're all here at CypherCon. Talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to your coworkers. People get rid of their gear like a fairly regular cycle, and oftentimes you can pick it up for free, right? Talk to your friends and family, like, hey, are you getting rid of that? And the answer might be like, yeah, and like, oh, like, can I have it? And the answer might be yeah again, right? Your work may be surplusing equipment. Talk to your boss. Hey, can I have that? Can I buy that? How can I get my hands on it? In the higher ed world, right, we have a lot of surplus equipment that goes up for auction that students and others in the community can bid on. Reddit has a Homelab sales subreddit, which is fantastic. Lots of deals on things on there. eBay is good, Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist. Again, you can totally get creative. You do not have to buy new gear unless you really, really, really want to. So phase 3, software and services. You got some equipment, and you are ready to start deploying some services onto that. So if you are a student, and again, who's a student in here? Good news is you can get a lot of free and cheap software. There are many open source solutions that exist. Being a student absolutely helps. Many companies have free and cheap Homelab licenses. So VMware has the academic program. If your institution is enrolled in this, you can get things like VMware vSphere and vCenter licenses for free that may or may not change depending on what happens with the whole Broadcom buyout. I hope nothing too bad, right? And there's also the VMware users group you can get a lot of this licensing through as well. Microsoft has their Azure Dev Tools for Teaching program, which again, your institution may be a member of. This will get you $100 a year in credits, which is fantastic for using their cloud services. And they'll also give you free licenses of like Windows Server and other common on-prem Microsoft products. Veeam has their not for retail licensing, so you can run Veeam to back up your environment totally for free. It's awesome. And then you can also get Nessus Essentials if you want to run like a vulnerability scanner. So lots of free and open source tools you can run in your lab. Again, you don't have to spend a lot of money. It's one of the awesome things about messing around with home labs. Thinking about your hypervisors, these are going to be kind of the main options. There are others. VMware was the most common up until recently. Broadcom recently bought out VMware, so there's been a lot of anxiety in the home labber community about what's going to happen to the VMware. Am I still going to be able to get VMware ESXi? As an educator, will I still be able to sign WCTC up for the VMware academic program, right? There's a lot of unknowns. So VMware was kind of the best option because a lot of businesses run it, and ultimately you're using a home lab to learn and grow your skill sets, to hopefully advance in your career, learn a new skill, get a job, right? So VMware is fantastic, but I'm not sure how that's going to evolve and change in the future. Proxmox is also pretty awesome. I talked about maybe redoing my lab over the summer. I'm probably going to move to Proxmox. Show of hands, who's currently using Proxmox? Yeah, what do you guys think? Is it good? Yeah, right. I used it once or twice a few years ago. I'm probably going to try it out again. But Proxmox is less enterprisey than VMware, so there are some things like Veeam that work really, really well with the VMware products that don't quite work as well with Proxmox. But again, I think that landscape's going to change. And you're going to want to run some worthwhile services. I talked about some of these already. I think setting up VLANs is really good and practical to kind of get your networking skills into shape. Practicing with firewall rules on your pfSense or OpenSense firewall. Setting up a VPN, right? I run Tailscale. It works really, really well. And there's other VPN products you can play around with. For DNS, you can set up different types of DNS filtering and sinkholes with things like NextDNS, Pi-hole, AdGuard. And if you are brave enough to host services out of your home lab, you could even set up dynamic DNS with something like Cloudflare. Worthwhile services, especially as it relates to cybersecurity. You can install Snort and Suricata on pfSense, on OpenSense. You can play around with this stuff. It is so much fun. Veeam is great for disaster recovery. We'll be talking about that at the end when I talk about pitfalls, right? It is good to back up your environment. For fun stuff, right? Plex Media Server. Who here runs Plex? Yeah, it's a lot of fun, right? DVR, you get movies, load them onto your NAS, play them that way. OpenVAS and Nessus are great for vulnerability scanning. Setting up an Active Directory home lab, I love doing that, right? It's really good at practice. We'll be talking about cyber ranges in a few minutes. So building an in-home cyber range. There are so many services and so many pre-built VMs and tools you can run at home to practice cybersecurity. I love offensive security. I love kind of breaking into things. So I run a lot of this stuff at home, and these are a lot of the same things I use in my ethical hacking and web application security classes at WCTC. Again, you don't have to go and spend a ton of money on subscriptions and fancy courses to learn this stuff. Download it, run it at home, and really the only real expense to you is going to be that power usage and some time, right? So a lot of really great fun ways to learn cyber. Homelab has a ton of vulnerable machines. It's kind of like Hack the Box, but DIY. You get to run this on-prem. Metasploitable 2 and 3 are some VMs you can download that are terribly misconfigured, and there are tons of vulnerabilities you can exploit and hack and do. OS Juice Shop is great for practicing your web app skills. I use this in my web application class. It's tons of fun. And then I think learning Active Directory is super important, but not just learning how to set it up, but also learning how it can be misconfigured, how it can be abused, because most companies and organizations are going to have some AD environment. And there's lots of really cool tools out there to set up bad AD environments. There's one tool called Bad Blood, another one called Goad, Game of Active Directory. So I'd highly recommend checking those out. Back pocket distros. So one of the awesome things about having a virtual environment is you can have all of these operating systems and all these distros ready to go to play around with and experiment with. So I have these distributions kind of cloned or have it snapshotted just in a base level kind of OS out of the box standpoint. And I can just quickly just right click and clone these out. So as I'm messing around in my cyber range or using services like Hack the Box, if I need Kali Linux, I can just right click on Kali, clone it out, and then I got a fresh Kali VM for my Hack the Box session. Same thing with ParrotOS, things like standard Windows 10, Windows 11, Ubuntu, all those things, again, from messing around with, just right-click clone, 30 seconds later, I have a VM to play around with. And again, I think it's one of the great advantages to quickly to having a Homelab is you can quickly mess around with these things without spending hours manually installing or downloading software again and again and again. Cloud services. So it is great to run all this stuff on-prem, but I think learning cloud services is really, really important. Most companies and organizations are going to use the cloud, and there are some really kind of useful ways you can incorporate this in. A lot of ways to improve your quality of life as you're going through and working with your Homelab. So what are some of the things you might want to use cloud for? Well, obviously learning cloud and cloud security. In terms of quality of life, here are some of the things that I've used it for. Cloudflare, right, is great for dynamic DNS. I have Spectrum at my house, so I get a dynamic IP, right? It changes from time to time. Cloudflare, you can use it for free, right, as a dynamic DNS service, and it's really easy to configure this with pfSense or OpenSense. It's pretty fantastic. For DNS filtering, you can set up a Pi-hole or do something like NextDNS, which is kind of more of a cloud provider. You can either get it for free or it's really relatively cheap. It's a great way to quickly, add DNS filters onto your home network, block certain websites, all that stuff. It's pretty cool. Reverse proxies, right? If you have maybe like a situation that would call for that, you can also set up DigitalOcean VM, and you can use reverse proxy for purposes like that. And of course, VPNs, Tailscale for either secure tunnel or just for being able to connect back to your environment to mess around with it when you're out and about. What about cloud compute, right? There's a lot of really good services out there. I mentioned a little bit before about the Azure DevTools for Teaching. I think that is a fantastic program. And what's really cool about this is if you are a student and your institution subscribes to Azure DevTools for Teaching, you get $100 per year in credit that you get to use. And the best part about this is no credit card required. So if you set something up and forget about it, you will not get a surprise bill in the mail. So that is pretty fantastic. And you also get a lot of free Microsoft licensing that you get to use for things like Windows Server. Up until fairly recently, at least at WCTC, we used to be able to get Windows 10 and Windows 11 licenses. And that was fantastic because who here likes to build computers, right? I think a lot of us do. And getting that Windows license can be inconvenient. And you could always get it free from Azure DevTools, but recently, that's changed, at least at WCTC, which is a bummer. But the cool thing is that you still can get Windows Server and some other licensing out there. AWS Educate is another option, depending on, again, where you go to school and where your institution is affiliated with AWS. You can get anywhere from $35 to $200 in credits. And that works out pretty well if you want to learn AWS. But there's a pitfall. Credit card is required. This was a lesson learned on my part. I had signed up for this AWS Educate. I deployed a VM in I forget what size it was. It was only like 10 or 15 bucks a month. So after a couple months, after hearing nothing and totally forgetting about that VM that I deployed, after all my credit was spent, I got a surprise bill in the mail like 4 months later, and I was like, crap. Not only did I lose my $100 in AWS credits, but now I also have to pay this like $10 bill, right? Because I forgot to turn that thing off. And I like DigitalOcean quite a bit. You can set up quick, easy to deploy virtual machines in the cloud. So I host some things on there as well. So in summary, here are some of the cloud services that I use. Tailscale for VPN, NextDNS for DNS filtering, and Cloudflare for dynamic DNS. And again, this is just what I use. Think about your goals. Think about what's going to add some quality into your life. And be careful because it is easy to spend a ton of money. Again, there are so many rabbit holes. Take it one day at a time, one piece at a time, and reflect on this stuff every 6 to 12 months to make sure you are still going down the path that you want to be going down. And if you don't, that's okay. You can always tear it down and start over. That's the whole fun in this, getting to learn how to build this stuff and how to configure it. But beyond the home, there are some really worthwhile services. I'm a huge fan of Hack the Box Academy. Does anybody subscribe to this? It is great. If you are a student, it is roughly $8 per month. It is a fantastic value. They have a lot of really great curriculum and content on there. Hack the Box also has VMs and labs you can subscribe to, anywhere from free to $50 per month. And what's cool about this is you can sign up for just like a month at a time and very easily cancel it. They don't make you jump through a lot of hoops. So I'm a huge fan of that platform as well. Beyond that, Portsbigger has their Web Security Academy. That's really fantastic for learning web security, and it's totally free. There is some pressure to buy Burp Pro, which is not a free product. How much does Burp Pro cost? Anybody know? It's like, yeah, $500 a year, right? And it is a subscription service, so you have to buy it every single year. You can't just buy it for a week. You're locked in. But the cool thing about the Web Security Academy is there are a lot of workarounds to Burp Pro, and you can totally use Burp Community or other free products to approach that content. And beyond that, I hear a lot from my students that Hack the Box is really, really hard. And my general sense is, well, everything in this field is hard. Like, dive in. This is why you're here. You love that challenge, right? But if you want something more approachable, there's also Try Hack Me. They have a lot of really great guided labs, a lot of really kind of great guided activities, and that's anywhere from free to about $15 per month. Phase 5, reflection. This right here is just as important as goal setting. It is important to think about what you just did, what you've been doing, and think about, does it still make sense? Have your learning goals changed? Are the folks in your house really, really annoyed with you? So it's time to do some reflection, right? On yourself and everybody in your community, right? Think about how your lab's been impacting them and make some adjustments. So some common pitfalls. I talked a little bit about this at the beginning of my talk. So the internet is down. I call this the scream test. I've learned very quickly not to do production changes when my wife is working from home, right? I do this stuff when I'm home alone by myself, so that way if mistakes are made, I'm the only one to have to deal with those consequences. Intrusion detection can be fun. Intrusion prevention can be painful. Anybody ever run into this? Configuring, Suricata or Snort, click that rule, oh, like that blocked like half the traffic in my home. Whoops, I'll quickly undo that. DNS filtering, very, very similar. It's really great. You see the ad blocking, right? Turn that all on next DNS, and all of a sudden your significant other and yourself, you're confused. Why are certain links broken, right? Why can't I click here, but I can click here? Think about what you just did with DNS, right? It's always DNS. And of course, watch power consumption. My rack, it pulls like 500-600 watts. So it is a lot of money, is an investment. So if you are leaving for vacation, if you don't need that stuff running, turn it off, right? When you're buying equipment, that nice Dell 4U server that is only 4 or 5 years old, that has like 300 gigabytes of memory, it may look really tempting, but guess what? You're gonna spend like $1,000 a year in electricity to run that thing. So you don't need to spend a lot of money. Reflect on those goals. Be mindful of what you are consuming. Otherwise, you're gonna wake up one day and be like, wow, where'd all my money go? And of course, back up your configurations. My rack is in the basement, right? This is some unfortunate soul who has a flooded basement and a flooded server rack, right? You do not want that happening. So back up your configurations of your home, of your network. Have a plan for disaster recovery, right? So run Veeam, run a tool to practice that. Have an offline network map and make sure network jacks are labeled correctly. And this is really important if you use VLANs. If your switch fails and now you get a new switch, it's a lot easier if you can just quickly either restore a configuration or quickly know which switch ports are supposed to be on which VLAN. So document all that stuff. And always keep a backup router on hand. So if you buy or use a nice pfSense firewall, OpenSense firewall, that's great, but don't toss out your D-Link or Linksys router, that old consumer router. Hang on to it, put it in the drawer. Because inevitably, there'll be a day when something breaks and you're too busy to fix it and you just need internet access. And you'll have that device in your drawer. You can pull it out, plug it in, and get on with your day and then deal with the Homelab stuff over the weekend or whenever is convenient for you. So think about the next steps on your Homelab journey. Do not just set it and forget it. And again, I would highly encourage you to reflect on your goals every 6 to 12 months, right? It's gonna be a good way to kind of reflect, am I learning what I wanting to learn? Did I learn what I wanted to learn? And what do you wanna do next, right? So think about that stuff. And don't be afraid to tear it down and start over. I know for me, even it's difficult. I spent so much time and energy building this stuff. I just want to let it run, right? But don't be afraid to go into that uncomfortable zone, format that disk, start over, test your DR. That's why you do home labs, to grow your skill set, to experience some unusual things, and to have a lot of fun. So with that, thank you so much. I really appreciate everybody here in my community, CypherCon and Michael for giving me this opportunity. If you have any questions, please do not be afraid to connect with me, reach out to me. I have a QR code up here that isn't working all that well, which is good. I also have a short URL. If you go to jimschultz.info, that will go to my LinkedIn page. You are welcome to connect with me. I just ask if you connect with me, just say, hey, we connected at CypherCon, and I'll say, great, thanks for connecting with me. Again, any questions, do not be afraid to reach out at any time. Even if it's not today, if it's not next week, not year, not maybe next year, totally okay. I'm always happy to talk with all of you. So with that, do we have any questions? Over here, blue shirt.
Do you do anything with automation, like Ansible for deploying standard environments and stuff?
I'm not currently, but that sounds like a really good idea. Yeah. Yes, so the question was, am I currently using Ansible for automation? And I'm currently not. Thank you for reminding me to repeat the question. What else do we got? Over here?
You had mentioned earlier about like using x86 for compute systems.
Yes.
Is there a difference between
Yeah, so the question was, do you need to use x86 or is like a 64-bit system acceptable in comparison to ARM? You can totally use like any Intel or AMD-based processor is typically what I'd recommend. The ARM devices would be things like Raspberry Pis, the newer MacBook Airs and Pros that are all the M1, the M3 CPUs, and things of that nature. Okay, who else? Yeah, back there.
Do you use cold storage for any of this for offline backups?
I don't. My backups currently are just my TrueNAS. Maybe someday though, right? Yeah, and the question again for that was, do I use cold storage for backups? And I do not currently. Good question, though. Ooh, I saw so many hands over here.
Do you currently use TrueNAS Core, and are you planning on migrating to TrueNAS Scale, since IX Systems is probably the core of the core?
Yeah, so the question was, I currently use TrueNAS Core, right? Will I move to TrueNAS Scale? And I probably will at some point, or I'll try Unraid or another service. Yeah, so I probably will at some point. Currently, I'm running Core. I haven't had any issues with it over the past few years I've been using it. It's been a pretty fantastic product. Go ahead.
So say you're changing from TrueNAS to Unraid. How would you even go about that?
Ooh, how would you move your NAS from TrueNAS to Unraid, right? That's a really complicated question, right? You're gonna have to have some storage somewhere to back up your stuff. So this is where I think it's really helpful to have friends. You can get 20 terabyte hard drives for some money, right? Not very, very cheap. But when I migrate, I'll probably invest in a couple large hard drives, right? And I'll move things onto those hard drives, redo my NAS and load them off. That, or I'll just delete a bunch of stuff. Again, it's a Homelab. Nuke those backups. I don't need all of them, right? And I'll start clean. Yeah, and the question is, did I repeat the question already? Yeah, okay, cool, thank you. All right. Go ahead.
I noticed you have the OSCP and OSWE. Was your Homelab experience applicable to getting those?
Yeah, so the question was, I recently earned my OSCP and OSWP. How did my Homelab help me with that? Is that kind of what you're getting at? Yeah, so my Homelab was totally applicable to those, especially for the OSWP, because you don't get like a drop-in lab environment from offensive security. They just give you instructions on how to set up your lab. So totally for the wireless exam, that was really useful for that. OSCP, I would say 100% as well, because in order to do well on that exam, it's really useful if you have a strong foundation in networking and computing technology. So absolutely, that pays total dividends for that. Thank you. And then in the back? I have not used Headscale, although I have considered it. Yeah, so I've been primarily using Tailscale. So the question was, have I used Headscale? I have not currently, no. Good question, though. Yes?
Do you have any recommendations for any open source or free-to-user security provisions for Homelab?
What do you mean by provisions?
Like if you were using some public-facing, like net hosting, whatever, for example, like a web server.
Yeah, so for like hosting web servers, is that what you're asking? You can totally set up a web server in your Homelab. I'm just going to recommend, if you're going to make that available on the internet, make sure you put that in a DMZ, so that way the bad guys can't get into your home network, right? Yeah. So you can set up, Apache, Nginx, just put it on an Ubuntu web server, and make sure it's firewalled off. Yep. Go over here, green shirt.
Have you looked at local stack for AWS on a smaller scale?
Ooh, so the question was, have I looked at local stack for AWS? I have not looked into that yet. Yeah, different ideas. And as these questions are getting asked, take notes, right? Practice good note taking. There's some amazing questions being asked right now. In the back over here.
If I decide to host a public-facing web server or email server, are there any concerns of limitations that a residential ISP may present or monitoring with tracking?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question was, if I want to host like a web server or an email server on my residential internet connection, will my ISP stop that activity, or will they permit it, or is there any special configurations that I might need to make? And depending on your ISP, that may be the case. Like I have Spectrum at my home. I can run a web server, and that's fine. I'm pretty sure they block email, and that's the case. And that's where if you want to do stuff like that, you could also set up a reverse proxy with a service like DigitalOcean, and you can get away with some of that stuff too by funneling it through that. Yes?
So just to continue on that, like, if you're going to do that, I recommend reviewing your home residential terms of service.
Yeah. So Spectrum, all of your ISPs are going to have service agreements. You should definitely review. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, because you don't want to lose your internet connection. That'd be bad, right? You do not want that letter in the mail. Anybody else? Yeah, back there.
What's the best way to destroy a solid state drive?
Best way to destroy a solid state drive. Ooh, I would format it, and then I would take my drill to it. That's what I would typically do. Yes?
There are a number of tools in Linux that you can use to actually overwrite that.
Yeah. There are a lot of tools you can use to overwrite it. But when I destroy disks, like if you're thinking about actually like getting rid of it, surplus it, I do actually drill through it, which I think is fun. Bring out the power tools, right?
Okay, anybody else? Let's see what time it is. Yes.
You know that page you have with all the links and resources, like the training exercises, like those?
These guys?
Yeah, I just want to take a picture.
Yeah, please take a picture. And if anybody wants a copy of my slide deck, just connect with me on LinkedIn and you can totally ask for it and I'll send it to you. You in the back?
Do you know of any other viable free alternatives to Proxmox?
Free viable alternatives to Proxmox. Yeah, I would suggest if you are not too into VMware and not too crazy about Proxmox, XCPNG is a pretty fantastic. It's a fork of Zen Server, so I totally would recommend that. And if you want to learn more about Microsoft technologies, Hyper-V could be useful as well. Okay, anybody else? It's a blue shirt again.
What's your motivation for using Proxmox versus something like KVM directly?
Honestly, I just want to learn more about Proxmox. I'm curious about it. I've heard a lot of chatter about it in the Homelab community, and now I'm curious, right? I'm curious, and I want to learn more. And yeah, I may try something else later on. All right, who's next? We still got 10-ish minutes. Yeah, over here.
Are you familiar with the Proxmox helper scripts, and how much do you love ZFS?
I am not familiar with Proxmox helper scripts, and ZFS, I've not had any issues with it yet. Knock on wood, right? I haven't had any issues. I prefer it more than traditional RAID for sure. Yeah. Hand to the back over there. I have. That was years ago, and it worked okay, but at least when I was looking at it, and I could be wrong, I felt like I was lacking a lot of the enterprise features. Moved very quickly over to like some of the other. Yeah. Yeah, and with pfSense too, one interesting thing is Netgate has been changing around their whole licensing for pfSense. Has anybody heard about this? Yeah, it's been not great to the Homelab community, just like I'm very fearful that Broadcom's not going to be very favorable with the VMware licensing to the Homelab community. So a lot of Homelabbers are moving off of pfSense to OpenSense. And I tried that. Here's the fun thing with tearing it down. I was running pfSense, and I have a 40 gigabit network card for my lab, and pfSense could pick up the drivers just fine. I put OpenSense on my lab over my winter break. The drivers were a little bit wonky to get my network card working. I was able to get them working. I ran an update on OpenSense a few weeks later, and guess what happened to my network? I rebooted the device and didn't come back up, right? So I moved back over to pfSense. I restored my configuration. So yeah, I'll probably be moving more to OpenSense again once I have more time to mess around with it.
So say you want to learn, say, you have Ubiquity Dream Machine.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And say you have a FortiGate and you want to learn both of them. Do you recommend having two separate environments on them on? Do you recommend somehow interconnecting them?
Yeah, so the question was if you have different types of technologies you want to play around with, should you set up two different environments or somehow try to incorporate or integrate them together? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so I would recommend, you can have more than one home lab, right? So I would say set up two environments. Don't be afraid to do that. But again, just be mindful about your goals because all of a sudden you might have all this stuff running around your house and you're going to get lost and confused and distracted and you're probably going to get less value out of it than just focusing on just a few small things. Anybody else? Yes. So yeah, I have done some, but not a lot, at least not recently. Way back when, it was like some Z-Wave technologies for like door locks and things like that and messed around just a little bit. I use like Q light bulbs in my house a little bit. I haven't done that so much. Again, there's only so much time in the day, so pick your battles. You're not going to be able to learn it all, but it's excellent to have these conversations to spur ideas for sure. Yes?
Have you toyed around with Kubernetes?
Toyed around with Kubernetes. I have a little bit. I've not dove into that rabbit hole quite yet because that is quite the rabbit hole. But I want to. Maybe this summer, right, when I get a break. Okay. Anybody else? Otherwise, I'm happy to take questions out in the hallway too. Cool. All right. So with that, again, thank you so much for coming to my talk. I am super excited that I have. Yeah, thank you. I'm super excited that I have a full room. I really, really appreciate that. I was going to put my QR code back up here for a second in case anybody needs that. You've all been a fantastic audience. I was telling my students, I just want a full room, and look at this, full room. So thank you so much. So I hope everybody has an enjoyable rest of the conference, and I hope to connect with you soon. See you around.